imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal. Protonic reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rock about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It means something. It means something. You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal!
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact that we are all up in your face. It is time once again for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it. Welcome to it. Welcome to it. Tonight, Mike Baggatta, great guitarist. If you heard at the time of this recording, still patron only Mike Watt episode, you'll know all about this guy. Or if you saw MSSV or any of the other iterations of this fantastic player, we're going to have a Mike on it. I'm very excited to talk to him. He's a interesting cat, and they got a new record, and it's awesome. So that's a good reason to come on Protonic Reversal, and that is indeed what is happening. So yeah, we're gonna get right down to it. Let's do this spiel here, as Watt always says. Welcome to Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. I am your host, Conan Neutron. I'm a rock and roll lifer who has toured and recorded for over 23 years, most known for the band Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. Music is a huge part of my life, and I use the format of this long-running podcast to talk about music with musicians whose work I enjoy and respect. Folks that may or may not be household names, but do something very special. This is episode 315. If this is your first time listening to the show, all the archives are at protonicreversal.com and are always free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding. If you'd like to support the show and get episodes sooner, you can give $1 a month to patreon.com/protonicreversal. And if you like the show or even just a single episode, please feel free to share it along, like, subscribe, or post a review. All that helps people find the show, and it's just a darn nice thing to do. All right. There we go. That wasn't so bad, right? like those are getting a little less unnatural, which is good. So without further ado, let's talk to the guitar man himself. Mike Beggatta, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Conan. Thanks for having me.
I was jamming your record, the new record, that is to say, earlier, and it's a ripper, man. Like it's a good kind of like have on while you're like active and doing stuff. I'm talking about the new one, Every When We Go. I'm talking about, which is Baggatta. So it's under the name jazz style, Mike Baggatta, Jim Keltner, Mike Watt, right?
Yeah, the law firm style.
I got corrected on this by Watt, and I felt bad about it, but I was like, I could.
Gotta keep the record straight.
I know. But there's understandable confusion because MSSV, main steam, not stream, stop valve, was a thing. So it's understandable that there could be some confusion.
Is still a thing.
Is a thing. So again, because people have a hard time paying attention to literally anything. But you have kind of like two operations. Now, I know, because I've listened to the classic Mike Watt episode from earlier this week by nature of recording it. But it started off with Live Flowers. There's MSSV with the record main steam stop valve. And then there's the sort of like jazz standard, Here Are the Players, Every When We Go.
There's another one before that even.
There's another one before that. You're right. Yeah, of course.
Let me. I know Watt went over it with a fine-tooth comb, but I'll do it here too. And then if you get two different sounding voices saying the same thing, I think it's going to increase my chances of having everybody stay on the timeline.
Actually find it. Yeah, exactly.
So the first record that I did with Watt was called Wall of Flowers, and
Wall of
that is a Mike Baggatta, Jim Keltner, Mike Watt band. That was the first one.
Mhm.
I wanted to tour that album when it came out in 2019, and Jim, he doesn't really travel anymore, and so I still wanted to do something. Watt said he was down, and I said, well, let's find a different drummer.
Right.
And I got in touch with Stephen Hodges, and
He's a monster player. Absolutely.
Who's one of the greatest drummers in the world, and obviously one of my favorites too. And I was pleased that he was willing to do that. So he signed on to do the tour. We recorded all those shows, and we put out a record called Live Flowers, and that was the first MSSV recording. On that tour, we decided, oh, you know what? This is different enough that it should be its own band, its own project. So we came up with the name. The name's a Watt Suggest, and for a lot of good reasons, we kept it. And then after we did another little tour late in 2019, and then that was kind of to work out the music for the Mainstream Stop Valve studio recording, which came out in late 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And that's MSSV, called Mainstream Stop Valve. And we did a tour for that one earlier this year, spring, I guess it's 2022, right? So
yes,
March,
yes.
April, I don't know. It's so
was
hard.
that the one? I don't want to interrupt you because you're doing a great job explaining. Was that the one where you played all the different regions of California? I thought that was a cool.
That was the end of 2019. That was the one where we warmed up the music to record the record. Yeah.
I feel like you got all the regions, but like Eureka.
I know. In my mind, I was like, I'm going to hit every climate zone in California.
Yeah.
You know, we did SoCal on the coast. We did desert. We did Central Valley. We did kind of like Bay Area coast, and then we did Bay Area, and then I forgot. Oh, there's a whole other top half of California that's like the redwoods and stuff,
which is beautiful, but it's very out of the way.
Yeah,
and that's one of the reasons why you should play it, of course. But like,
of course, yeah, right, yeah.
For bands that are on tour, it's harder to make the time if you're trying.
I guess like Weed or Wairika, or those kind of places, right?
I suppose you could play there, yeah. But anyway, but I'm interrupting the explanation I asked for.
Oh no. So anyway, so we so then late last year, almost a year ago exactly, me and Jim and Watt got together again, and we recorded this new album, Everywhere We Go, which is the second Mike Baggatta, Jim Keltner, Mike Watt record. But after the 2022 MSSV tour, MSSV recorded another record, which I'm working on right now. That's going to come out fall of next year when we do our next US tour also. So it's two kind of tandem projects. Yes, MSSV grew out of the very first Baggatta, Keltner, Watt record, but they're two totally different bands. And I do have sympathy for anyone that can't keep track of it.
Well, I mean, I guess the key factor is it's all worth paying attention to. It's all very good music, but it's
for sure.
I keep closer attention than most, and I still screwed it up at least twice. So I mean,
sometimes I forget which band I'm into.
Also, how many times have you gotten people doing mainstream Stop Valve?
Oh man, you would believe what I've heard. Yeah. Yeah, it's main steam stop valve. An easy way to remember it is that it's a very important part of the motor of a steamboat. It's the part that keeps the engine running. It's kind of like the main valve. So if you think about that, you won't get it wrong.
I actually do know what it is, but my autocorrect did not. And I'd be like, no, stop.
That actually happens with Everywhere We Go. Also, a lot of like computers aren't familiar with the concept of everywhere yet, so they keep changing it back to everywhere.
Yeah, I think you mean Everywhere We Go. No, I actually don't. But
we got to teach the technology sometimes, you know.
Yeah, exactly. As Mike once said in a Minutemen video that I stole for an album title, "Machines Will Always Let You Down." So this Loose Limb collaboration, the incredible Jim Keltner. I mean, for people that are not familiar, you know his work. Like he's on like all these fantastic records. You know, he's did stuff with the Wilburys. Like he's just amazing session guy. Kind of getting. I mean, you wouldn't know it necessarily looking at him, but kind of getting up there in years. I mean, didn't he just turn like 80 or something?
Yeah.
So he's not road dogging it, right? I mean, like it's and that's kind of like how you got Hodges in.
Not that I know of. Yeah. Well, you know, I think Jim has always been, you know, well known as this, the guy to call for any session you have.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, he just has made a choice to kind of hang near the homestead more, and that's totally commendable. So yeah, that is what led to getting Hodges in this thing.
So when you're originally envisioning this, so go back to Flowers is the first one, right? If I remember correctly.
Wall of Flowers is the first Baggatta Keltner Watt record. Yep.
Right. So when you are putting that together, was the idea like, hey, let's just put something together, like let's make a thing, like, or did you have the idea of turning it into a live band?
No, actually, I thought nothing would ever come of it except the record. My friend Chris Schlarb, he runs the studio out in Long Beach called Big Ego Studios, and he was starting a record label called Big Ego Records. You see a theme here, right? And he and I had been friends for a number of years before this. And when he was starting all this up, he asked me, would I like to do a record for his label at his studio? And I said, yeah, of course I would, but I only want to do it if I can do something that I've never done before. And this gets into a long story, so let me know when you're tired of hearing.
It's a long form show, so please way into it.
It's a 7-hour story, so
okay. Well, hey, man, so until the end of the world of Protonic.
No, but so I had been recording my original music for a label in Barcelona called Fresh Sound.
Yeah.
And that's run by a guy named Jordi Pujol, and he was like super supportive of me. He gave me my first record deal, to be able to record my own music on like a somewhat known indie label and not have to spend any of my own money to do it. Like from the beginning, that was like unheard of, And it was a label, Fresh Sound was like a label that I had already had a lot of respect for. I'd really loved a lot of music that they put out earlier on in my life. So I did 4 records with them, and it was, records with my friends that I was living in New York at the time. And I'd made these little bands and had people that I was friendly with learn my music, and they would play my music. And in my mind, I always thought, like, if you wanted to make a great record, you obviously would have to make the music with your friends that you've known for years and years and years and years, right? That's the way that all great bands are, right? That was what I thought. That's always
the story. Yeah, everything's got to be like the Monkees, where y'all live in the same house.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and like, my dad is a guitar player, and I remember like his band coming over the house and practicing when I was little, and I'd sit on the top of the stairs and listen to them, but they were like friends for a really long time and stuff. And I think also I'd heard some records where I knew one way or another, I knew that the people on the record like didn't really know each other, or like the band leader had called like, some famous dude to guest on the record to get some street cred or whatever. And I always remember that kind of stuff feeling kind of cold, like never feeling like, wow, what a great timeless album. I never felt that way about those records, just the ones I've heard and my own mental attitude at the time or whatever. So in my mind, I was like, if you want to make a great record, you can only do it with people that you've known for forever. Okay, so we'll fast forward a little bit here. I was talking to a friend of mine, a great, amazing guitar player, composer named David Torn. And his, I believe it's his first record that he did for the ECM label. It's called Cloud About Mercury. And it's his music, guitar compositions with Mark Isham on trumpet and electronics, Tony Levin on bass, and Bill Bruford on drums. And like electronic, like tonal drum. Yeah, right.
Yeah, sounds okay. Yeah, I'm in.
Good band, right? And yeah. So that's like always been a really like a cool record, kind of one of my favorites. And I remember asking him something about it, and I think I alluded to like the fact that like it must have been pretty cool to make that first record with like guys you'd known forever. And he was like, oh, I didn't know any of them. I cold called all those guys for that record. Awesome. I think he even like wrote a letter and sent it to Bruford over in the UK and stuff. And he got back in touch with him. It was this whole like great story that he has. It's actually amazing. And I remember like listening to this though. And keep in mind, I'm like in my mid-30s when he's telling me this. I'm sitting here going, wait, you mean you didn't know any of those guys? And then the subtext is like, oh, so you can make a great record with people that you've never met. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I hadn't been clued into that until I was, 36 or whatever, however old I was when he told me.
That's so really That's really funny, and I'll tell you that in a reason afterwards.
Okay.
That age specifically is funny, but
I won't let you forget. And then, so then a little bit after this, maybe a year after this or whatever, I've been thinking about this. Mr. Schlarb gives me this opportunity, and I said, okay, I want to do it, but I only want to do it if I can do it this way. I want to try to make a band and make a great record with people I've never met and who've never met each other. And I want to see how this is going to work for me. And so he said, okay, who do you want to use? And immediately I knew Mike Watt and Jim Keltner. Why haven't these guys played together before? They're like both two of my favorite instrumentalists on their respective instruments, but also in the way that they serve the songs that they play in different ways. But they have some kind of similar like approach to respecting the music or something, I thought. And so I thought it was a kind of an obvious choice. But so time goes on a little bit, maybe 6-8 months, and we keep talking about it, and we figure out a way that we can make this happen. And Chris wrangles all the cats that need to be wrangled, and we all can meet for one day. I think it was in May of 2017. Mm-hmm. It says it on the record, but I forget. So we had one day in the studio at Chris's studio in Long Beach, and I met Watt that day, and I met Jim that day, and Jim met Watt that day.
So you guys, so to get this straight, none of you fellas had ever actually met in person before.
Correct. So awesome. We meet in the studio the day, and we only have one day to make the record.
Right. No press. Yeah, no press.
Yeah. And well, what was funny is that I came in with a stack of music that in my mind I thought, we'll just hammer out these tunes and we'll make a record, which is kind of something that I'd been doing on my Fresh Sound records. Mm-hmm. But it was a really good learning experience for me because I got to see how different people can work in different ways that I hadn't been exposed to before. And for a variety of reasons, it wasn't going to be the type of session that I had been used to. So we recorded the first song, Hospital Song.
Okay.
And that felt great right from the get-go. And then I think maybe we tried one of the other songs that I'd written, but it was kind of like not really a groover and it had some weird time stuff and whatever. And it was kind of a difficult tune for everybody to link up on. So we took a break and maybe we did the Wallflowers song first before that even. Maybe we got 2 in the can. But then we took a break and we were hanging out for a while. And I think at one point, I just kind of asked Chris and I suggested to those guys, how would you feel about just improvising for a while? And they were down to do it. So we went back in the studio and I think we improvised for like 3 hours straight. And that was pretty much the rest of the session. At the very end, me and Jim did a duet on that song, Blue Velvet. But so at the end of the day, we had like 2 actual songs, this duo of me and Jim playing Blue Velvet, and then 3 hours of improvised material. And well, I had also
that is the record. I was not gonna bring it up until there was a good point, but I do like the iterations of Blue Velvet because that's one of my favorite films, and it's a very haunting.
Oh yeah. I mean, the song is like a great old Torch song, but of course there's like the Lynch connection.
I like the song on its own. I like the movie with the song, and I like the interpretation of it. So
yeah, it's one of those songs that it makes you feel like it's probably a creepier thing going on underneath.
Exactly. There's like some kind of undercurrent of
yeah. I mean, if we've all seen the movie, you can't unring the bell at this point, but some of those 50s pop tunes, like we know, we know, of course, that America was not so clean cut as those 50s.
It had the appearance of it, just like it did in the movie, right?
Yeah, exactly. But there's something kind of underhanded about the whole thing. Okay. But
anyway, so please continue. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. So anyway, so I went home and I kind of listened to everything and I listened to the improvised material and I was like, wow, there's some really amazing stuff on here. And I don't think I've ever heard these guys play this way. And so what I did is I thought, okay, I could take another page from David Torn's book, which is basically, the Cliff Notes version is like, you could improvise a lot of stuff, find maybe a starting point, an ending point, do a chop. And then what I did is I went and I transcribed everything that Jim was playing, everything that Watt was playing, everything that I was playing. And then I decided I could recompose to some of those elements and then overdub guitars with those elements going on so that it gives the impression, maybe what I hope it does is it gives the listener the impression like, I don't know if this is composed or improvised.
Gotcha. So it could seem like free music, but also seem like a written written and composed.
Yeah, but there's no way some of those things could happen if it's totally free, and there's no way some of those things could happen if it was composed either. I like those in between the spots, you know.
Well, and I mean, I don't think that obviously wouldn't be possible if you didn't know how to notate music and you have like that background. I would imagine, unless you're just.
Well, I do have that background, but I could see it being possible. I mean, you would just have to.
I guess you could, without making your own language, your own code book, or something.
Yeah, which I think a lot of musicians
is fine,
do.
And you're probably right about that. Yeah, but anyway,
which is what notation is anyway. Somebody had this idea and it stuck. You know, it's like it could have been somebody else's idea with some other symbols, and some guy got lucky that day. You know.
Yeah, you could easily put tablature to be Egyptian hieroglyphs. And,
yeah, exactly.
But anyway,
whatever works, I think.
Yeah, whatever works indeed. So okay, so you mark it out, right? And then
yeah. So actually, I don't know if you can see. I got these music books back there, but those notebooks are filled with some of this stuff and like my other little kind of there they are up there. So some of those in the back, I think, are the ones I use for Wall of Flowers. So they're just like all marked up and stuff. But so anyway, so I did that, and I just did that for the first 2 chunks of that 3 hours of improvised stuff. And on Wall of Flowers, these are the songs I'm talking about are called I Am Not a Data Point and Dirty Smell of Dying. And so that was the deal. That was the whole record. And then I had another like 2 hours of improvised material just kind of sitting around, you know. But that was what happened. And then, you know, what happened to get into the record that we're talking about today, the new one, Everywhere We Go, the reason that came about, back to your original question, I figured we would just do that one record and it would be really amazing and we'll see what happens. And that would be it, you know,
one and done, just music.
Yeah. Just a really cool experiment and just a learning experience and get to hang with people and whatever, and make some good music. But then one thing that was really cool was that Watt was into doing the tour, and then that turned into MSSV, which has turned into my main project at this point, which is really gratifying. And I mean, I've learned so much from hanging with those guys and working with those guys. And it's funny because like we did an interview after the last tour. The spring tour we did was the 48 shows in 48 days tour. And at the end of that, we did an interview, and you know, the person interviewing us was talking about, I was telling them the story about the Wall of Flowers thing, like what's it like to make music and with people you don't know. And this band came out of that, but then we've done so much and traveled together that now I just feel like I'm in a band with my friends again.
Right, exactly. So it's come back around, and there is that familiarity. You have that sort of kind of weird telepathy that comes from familiarity, like with a bandmate. You know, where people that are great improv players seem to have that anyway, but it hits differently.
But but also just the hang, like, you know, just sitting in the van for countless hours and just talking about music, and then emailing every week and phone calls and just enjoying each other's company. And, you know, it's funny how these things happen, you know. But so I had this 2 hours of kind of the rest of the original improv session. So right before COVID, I was kind of starting to mess with it and chop it up more. And I chopped it up into like 5 or 6 other pieces, and I transcribed it all out again. And I recomposed all this material. They're like these little symphonic free improv composition work things. And got it mixed, got it mastered. And I sent it to Chris and said, "Do you like this record?" And he was into it. And I said, "Great, we can put it out, you know." And I think he had, I think at one point in the process, I'd sent some stuff to Jim and he'd heard it and he was like, "Hey, sounds good." But then when the record was all done and ready to go, I think Chris this is sort of secondhand information, but as far as I understand, Chris sent the files to Jim. Jim took a listen, and he said something like, "This sounds really good, but if we want to do another record, it's already been like 2 or 3 years. Why don't we just do another record so that it'll sound like the way we sound now?" And so I thought, like, well, that's a really cool suggestion. And if that's a suggestion coming from Mr. Keltner, I think we should, you know, take advantage of that. So it took a little time because it was like height of COVID and all this stuff. But then last year, November 2021, we got together for another day and we did all of this. So there you have it.
Great. Okay, so there's a few things to go with all that, but I like the idea. So that Wallflowers record, especially, like it does have the feeling of like there's a certain kind of more relaxed feel, but kind of like there's an edginess to it as well that comes from people that are great players and they know how to make music and they know how to compose and play music, but it's their first time playing together. Like I think when people think of some of the great jazz records, right? Some of those guys is, so and so was just sitting in that one time, and that was the only time that happened. And
Right.
But because everybody is so great at what they're doing, it not only works, it has this interesting alchemy that transpires and brings out the best in everybody. So that's awesome in and of itself. But then when you're like, oh, we know how to do this, we kind of know how to do this with each other, what happens next? And I think that's cool as hell too, because then you get to kind of like, okay, wait, which way are we going to dig deeper? Not even like, can we dig deeper? It's which way are we going to dig deeper? And I think that makes it very interesting. And I think it's a cool record, man. Like, and it's, I want to get more into the minutia of it. The Everyone We Go record I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Where We Go is your auto correct will likely do. But logistically, so you're based out of you're like Florida or something, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, my wife and I just moved to Gainesville, Florida about a year ago.
And Watson, of course, Pedro. So yeah, as the world knows. So logistically, so how do you make it work logistically? I mean, there has to be a lot of like sending stuff back and forth. There has to be a lot of communication, right?
For the MSSV stuff?
Yeah. And that's sorry to switch gears so suddenly on that.
No,
I'm thinking about it in terms of because there's always a thing. I always talk about how when people you record the record, then you tour on the record, and like you never want to play the songs again by the end of it, but they sound great.
see, man, this is my whole thing, right? What you just said is what always happens, and I was in so many bands as a side person where that would happen, and I would always, at the end of the tour, I would think, why the hell does everybody do it this way? We should make the record now, So that's what
You're killing it, where it's just like it's just the best possible version of this song. But
that's what I always tried to do. That's what I always tried to do. Even the Fresh Sound records, even the last two Fresh Sound records, I would just book like real tiny little short mini tours, a week of gigs, and then make the record right after the little tour. But that's what I've carried through into the MSSV stuff. We did that California tour. We recorded the record, right? We did the 48-day Haru tour. Days 49 and 50, we recorded the record that's coming out next year, right? It makes so much more sense to me. You just go in and the music has evolved in ways that if you're a single composer on a song, you're never going to conceive of the stuff that people bring into it. That's the beauty of playing with other people, right?
That's collaboration, right?
There's collaboration of all kinds, yeah. And if you're not taking advantage of capturing that, you might as well sit home with the MIDI stuff and do it. It can sound good that way, but you're not going to get that magic of actually having other people that aren't you digging into music over and over and over and over.
Yeah. So the idea of like road testing it and kind of, and also there's things that, there's always when you're composing, you have these moments like, oh, this is really cool, man. I'm so excited for this. And then, you take it out of the laboratory and it's like,
right. It's terrible. Right.
We're like, whatever, or like worse, like, and then you're like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, I mean, I sometimes I'll play like solo gigs, and I'll bust out like newer kinds of things like that, just so that I have a place to try it with an audience.
Sure. It's
and you figure stuff out real fast that way,
It's why comedians do open mics. It's
exactly.
the risk is low, but you can kind of see what works. And in that same way, there are things that maybe you are just like, yeah, whatever, this is fine. And then people like really connect with it, or people really.
Sometimes there might be something that you think is not good, but then when you play it with other people, all of a sudden you see it from a different perspective, and you realize, oh, there is potential there, But with MSSV, what I'll do usually, going back to the MIDI thing, what I'll do usually is I'll actually I use this little pad here for a bunch of stuff, and I kind of hammer out the bass lines and the drum parts on that, and I make demos that I will email to Watt and Hodges, and they inevitably change it a little bit.
Yeah, they got to put their own spin on it.
I would much prefer than copy my dumb stuff. But I write the parts thinking of those guys. I think about Watt's sound, all the music on the new record that's coming out next year, the new MSSV record. A lot of that was built from the bass line, starting from the bass part, not line, the bass part, and kind of orchestrating the song from that. And I'm starting to write the next batch of MSSV music that we're going to record after the next tour. And that I'm really starting to think about building that up from the drums, and the way that, specifically the way Hodges approaches the drums as kind of almost this like, dancer, really like sensitive kind of player. And to be able to meld those things, it's such a gift to be able to orchestrate in this way for people that have such like strong, amazing voices on their instruments that really can influence me in a way that I've never been influenced. I mean, it's such a gift. It's really like kind of bizarre to me, but anyways, a lot of it will start here. I'll send it off to them. And I do go out to the West Coast a fair amount for other kinds of gigs and session work and stuff like that. And so when I do that, I try to hang with those guys, and maybe we can get some practice and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of what you said there that, is sort of like the nature of composing and being creative in this day and age, right? We can utilize these communication tools, for more than just radicalizing grandma on the internet. We can we can be creative with it. We can in days of yore where it would be like, hey, I made a 4-track of me playing this stuff. It's like you can show works in progress. You can kind of, hey, that's cool. Like, I think this arrangement, the arrangement would be better if, we did something here, and then you can just change it and then kind of move on rather effortlessly or breezily, if you will.
Yeah. And I mean, you can even record it now. Like, we're not the only ones to do this by far, but over lockdown, MSSV put out 3 7-inches that were all recorded completely all in our own little compartments. I would send the demo, Hodge would lay down the drums, he'd send the track back, I'd maybe do something else, and I'd send it to Watt, and he'd play bass to the drums, and then I'd send it back and change the guitar parts, and then we'd go send it to get it mixed and mastered and send it to the guy, the label that was going to put it out. So there's 3 7-inches that are each kind of like their own little concept. But all of those were recorded where we were, not able to be in the
weren't even in the same room. Yeah. Which is
and I think they sound real good. I mean, they still sound like MSSV stuff. They still sound like the band playing,
And as isolating as, the past couple of years have been for folks, and alienating and whatnot, it is somewhat astounding that you can utilize these tools if you're so inclined and willing to kind of put the effort in to do things like that. It's fantastic.
Well, it's a total lifeline too. Like, if you can't get together to play music, I mean, and you're a musician, you got to figure it out, or you're just going to lose your mind,
It's good. It's either that or just literally bounce off the walls. Yeah, pretty much that's it. So I think that okay. So and Watt mentioned that there was new MSSV stuff coming, which is exciting. What do you get out of? So let's stick with MSSV for a minute. What do you get out of MSSV that you haven't had in other outfits and in other live bands? Specifically, like what about those guys who are fantastic players? Obviously, I mean, before he ever played with Watt, I was a big Hodges fan. I mean, that guy is a monster, right?
Oh yeah, all those Tom Waits records.
I mean, one of my favorite artists of all time, right? And like, what Tom Waits, like, what's like one of the biggest things? The percussion. It's all like booming and
and all that crazy like trash circus drum stuff. That's on those early records.
There's a mule on a boat, and like someone's banging on garbage cans about it. Exactly.
Yeah, I love it.
And I say that as a fan. But every time you play with different people, it's now chemical reaction. People have different things that they do, different body language, different mannerisms, etc. So what have you picked up from Hodges and Watt from doing MSSV? Because I think it's interesting because you guys toured a lot. You're out like for a while, and like long enough to be like, this is like a unit now. This isn't like playing. This is like a band.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. There's two things when you ask that question, because I haven't really thought about that, because I kind of just spend my time in the doing, and when I'm in it, there's like, there's all these things that I feel and stuff. And then when it's over, I just look forward to the next time. But I think thinking about like why that is, there's two things that I can think of. The first thing is that I have never been around people in one of my projects that have so consistently been so like outwardly dedicated to internalizing my music every night. I mean, the amount that like we were all ready to work on and change and talk about the music to every gig, every morning, every sound check, after the gig, before the next gig, on the way to the next gig, all the way up until the recording was finished. It was like unbelievable that these guys were like so down with me to take that trip.
That's a huge thing. That's a major sign of respect. That's like a nod of confidence. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah, the confidence thing is really big for me because like, I think I don't think it's a weird thing to say because I think everybody, if they're like a creative person or even if they're not, if you're like a human being, I think you feel this way. But a lot of times you kind of have a feeling of like, you don't know if what you're doing is good or not, like some people call it imposter syndrome or there's all these phrases for it. But I think at the end of the day, if you care about something, you probably have some self-doubt about it, And
especially when you get really into it, you kind of hearts of darkness, like really get down the river with it. You're like, well, I don't even know where I am anymore. What's
yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
What is music? What is this?
You can go down the tunnel for sure. Yeah, but even for me, it's like I'll do things and I'll go like, yeah, I think this is fun for me. Yeah. Is everybody else having a good time? And so to know that through the actions of those guys, to be able to clearly want to work on the music, even when I'm not there, there's plenty of times I'd walk into a conversation between Hodge and Watt, like trying to figure out something with the rhythm section on the song. And I'm just sort of like, oh, there they are working on my music again while I'm like going to find a banana or something around town,
Right.
It was just a really cool, like self-confidence thing, but also it just made the music better. That's the most important thing. And when you have people that you can count on and that you can trust to make the music better, you can trust everything. And if you have trust together, then everything's going to come out better, especially if you're able to like accept that trust and then give that trust back. So in a way, like for me, MSSV becomes like this perfect band idea in a way, like we all have each other's trust to be able to work on the music all the time together and know that we're just trying to get the best thing out of it as we go. So that's really cool. And that's something I've never experienced like to this level. For sure. People they'd check out the music for the rehearsal and stuff like that. But I mean, I don't think they were like eating and breathing this music on tour like these guys are.
Yeah,
so.
That level of engagement is something special. And
it was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's still like that when I send stuff. It's just a gift to be able to work with people that love music, who love working on music as much as I do. And the second,
that's an important thing to mention because some people love playing music, but not everyone loves playing music and working on music.
Yeah,
that's a key distinction, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to point out. Yeah, for sure, because it's when you hit the stage, it's like that's its own thing, but there's a lot that's gone on behind that and before that to make that possible. And I've just seen different levels of that from different people, but I've always felt like I've always wanted to do it 110%. And now I feel like I'm with two other guys that want to do it 120%,
Did you have, how about vocals? So as a player, as someone that comes from like that sort of, that to a certain degree, that sort of jazz world, that instrumental world where you can make the instrument kind of take the place of like a vocal line or something along those lines. Was the original intention to keep it instrumental? Was there an intention in that at all? Like because there's
I would argue your point that I do have a jazz background, but I've always loved all kinds of music. But
I don't mean to put you in a corner or put you in a box. But
I don't want to spend the rest of my life trying to get out of this corner. So
fair.
There's a lot of great instrumental music that is not the J word, right? Like you could look at Jeff Beck.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, he's like one of the great guitar players and like
You could look at
phenomenally instrumental.
Dwayne Eddy. You could look at blah,
Link
blah, blah.
Ray.
Link Ray, right? Yeah. So we'll just put that out there. But at the same time, I've always loved music with words. The storytelling aspect, the sound of the voice, the personality behind it. It's like, man, I can't tell you like how much I love it. And I remember when I was younger, when I was maybe like 13 or 14 and kind of starting on guitar, I had a guitar teacher, and I learned my little chords and stuff like that. And my first teacher was my dad. He was really cool. He showed me all kinds of great stuff that got me started. But then I had like a teacher that wasn't him. And I remember I learned a song that I was playing guitar and I was singing along with it. I forget what song it was, but I remember playing it for the teacher, and his response was basically like, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, maybe no more singing. And at that age, you're just kind of like, you hang your head and you're like, all right, yeah, I won't do that again.
Yeah, that's a hard.
I should have had the attitude of like, forget this guy, man. I'll do whatever I want,
Yeah.
But I didn't. I kind of responded to it, and it really shut me down for like a long time. That said, expressing myself through the instrument has always been a really cool thing to strive to do. So I didn't really feel like I was lacking for stuff, but I had a lot of friends who sang, and I listened to a lot of music with vocalists. And I remember thinking like, oh man, I wish I could do that from that earlier experience. But over when we did the first MSSV studio record, Main Steam Stop Valve, there are two pieces on there with vocals.
There's like the theme, for lack of a better term,
and theme song,
the
Eureka moment, and then 9/20 December that Watt wrote after his mom's passing.
Yeah.
And both of those were basically me coming up with the music and kind of maybe trying to come up with some melody stuff, guitar melody stuff, and thinking like, man, actually what these need are words. They feel like they would do great. And so I sent the music to Watt, and I was like, hey, you want to put some words to this? And he was like, sure. And he figured something out and put the words down. So I was like, hey, that's great. That worked out cool. And then when we were doing our lockdown 7 inches, we did one that was based on 4 pieces of artwork by the artist Scott Eicher. And this is the one called the Scott Eicher EP, and Petra Hayden guests on the violin on that one. And so I wrote a song for each one of these 4 panels. So it's a little 4 movement mini micro nano opera. And the way I did it is I looked at the 4 panels, these 4 characters, and I came up with kind of a little screenplay in my head. Like, what's the story about the relationship here? And then I wrote the music for the little fake movie in my head, Right. And I sent these things to Watt, and I was like, hey, you want to write words to one of these? And he said, well, yeah, I can do that, but tell me what it's about. So I kind of told him my little screenplay, and he took those words, and that's all he used for the vocals. He sent it back, and I was listening to him. I was like, man, these words are great. And then I remember thinking like, wait a minute, this is what I wrote and sent to him.
Like this, that seems familiar somehow. Yeah.
And so at that moment, I thought to myself like, well, you know what? If that's what it is, this is an example of me writing the words for this song. I can do this. And so again, it's an example of like the band, people in the band helping me understand that I have the ability to do the thing that I want to do in the band. It's like this crazy, like, aerobaric, the snake that eats his own.
Ouroboros, but I like aerobaric as like almost being aerobic, as certainly Spell Check would
it's
say.
It's like an aerobaric example, of what it does for me, which I think is this really cool thing, because like the band is like this gift that kind of keeps giving people different.
Yeah.
It teaches you about yourself, like the more you deal with the music, with the people, it's a really beautiful thing. And so anyways, so at that point I was like, oh, you know what? All right. So I can go back to 13-year-old me, and I can give him a pat on the shoulder and say, you know what? You can do whatever you want. And so I kind of gave myself permission to write words and sing. So the spring tour we just did, 48 shows in 48 days, I sang every night. I wrote 4 new tunes for the new record. That's me singing. And those guys were really supportive of it. And, they backed me up a little bit. And the next record is going to be mostly vocals. So yeah, that's a new thing for me with this band. And I'm pretty psyched about it.
Well, and that's fantastic. That's super cool. I think it also is. It's notable because I think there's a block for a lot of people with singing, even
Big
very
time.
accomplished musicians that maybe
Big time. I've been there. Yeah.
They just feel like it's not for them, or that if you're a very accomplished musician, maybe very accomplished singers too, and you're like, well, I can't do any of that. Like that's.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm not doing opera,
yeah, but then then it's so important too because the world of punk rock and whatnot is just like, well, it doesn't really matter like how good you are. It's if you got something to say.
It was always expressing yourself. It's always been just you have to express yourself, and that's all I've wanted to do. So why shouldn't I allow myself to do it this way?
Certainly, yeah, absolutely, and it's again, it can people think they know what to expect from you. It can throw them right off too, which is also
I always like that.
It's a fun thing to do, yeah. So then you've got like a kind of solid unit. You can play. So how do you feel? Okay, as someone that has feet, different feet in different worlds. The audiences for the MSSV stuff, do they trend more towards like people that are just like rock people? What was the initial reception before people kind of knew what to expect from it?
No, yeah, it's all kinds of people, and that's what I love, and that's what I hope it continues to be. I want the rock people to come and think it's some avant-garde jazz band, and I want the avant-garde jazz people to come and leave thinking it's some kind of rock band. That's in my mind, that's exactly what should happen. It doesn't matter.
It's like the Rashomon effect or something.
It doesn't matter what the venue tells them, their subliminal mind, what they think it's supposed to be. It doesn't matter what the personnel on the jacket or the record cover makes them think that it's supposed to be. It doesn't matter what the instrumentation makes them think that it's what it's supposed to be. I want it to be like you never know what it is. And if it's some of this and some of that and some of that, the most important thing is that it has its own sound. And it sounds like a band, even though you might not know necessarily what kind of music it is.
Yeah, it might be difficult to explain, but it's definitely bad. I mean, I referenced my friend Brendan's band, Aesthetics, that I know you guys have played with.
Oh yeah, I'm buddies with Anthony. Yeah, and they we did a double bill in Baltimore on that tour. Yeah, it was really fun.
It kind of hits the same way as that, right? That it's not like there's like jazzy. That's a terrible descriptor. Sorry. There's like elements of like free music and like instrumental stuff, but like it is actually pretty tightly composed with, and it kind of straddles both of those worlds in a way that I think is. I almost kind of feel like there used to be more of those bands kind of kicking around, but like I think that's a great double bill as far as I'm concerned, because they're not bands that sound like each other, but there's definitely like a like-mindedness to it via approach.
Yeah, there's an unlimited like taking of music, and like it doesn't. No one's got the jazz police or the rock police or the punk police or the folk police or the country police on stage. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. And the audience. They don't want that either.
Now I'm just trying to imagine what the jazz police uniforms look like, and I'm having a good time doing it.
Black, no necktie.
Exactly. They would for sure have a uniform for sure in the jazz police. Okay, cool. So then, all right. So let's get back to, because I want to talk a bit more about the new record. Does Keltner have any crazy Plastic Ono band stories or anything from like back in the day? I mean, he played on like Nilsson. That guy's played with everyone. Like he's
got amazing stories. Yeah, he's got amazing stories.
Does he ever bust one loose? You're like, oh right, that's the thing that you did. Because I can only imagine where you get down to it, you're seeing each other as musicians, hearing each other as musicians, you're right in it, and then it's like, oh yeah, Jesus Christ, this guy's done everything.
Well, I mean, I already knew that going in. So
sure. I mean, well, of course, you asked.
I wasn't trying to. I mean, the last thing I want to do is like psych myself out while I'm playing. But I think I just kind of like I had all those thoughts before it happened. Yeah. But like Jim he's so chill and so supportive and so patient and such a cool, like positive dude that it was like, it was just like he puts you at ease right away anyway. So there wasn't really any of that kind of mental gymnastics. He was just he's such a pro, patient, creative, supportive guy to play with. It was like, it couldn't have been easier,
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he's just what is the cool. I mean, obviously he's played with freaking everyone, right? I mean, so it's like obviously
so, yeah.
It's like
now he has, yeah.
yeah, now yeah. So it seems like you must be a relatively agreeable dude, but it's I think I'm just thinking back like with like the level of discography that he has is it's up there with like the Wrecking Crew or something, really, as far
well that's his scene. But there's two things that come to mind actually. Like the first thing is that there's another situation where this guy is like wants to spend all the time he needs to get the part right for the song that we're working on.
Yeah.
And again, it's a humbling thing for me. It's like my dumb little song, but here's Jim Keltner like asking me like, what does this drum part need? It's missing something. What does it need? Doing another take, trying something else out, asking about the tempo, like he cares about getting the music right and making it as best as he can. Yeah. And that's like a really humbling thing to see and to be a part of for me. I really appreciated that. And like, I'm totally indebted to him for showing me that you still do that at 80, when you're Jim Keltner, you still sit there and you think about what snare drum should you be playing?
Yeah.
And what does this song need that it doesn't have yet in the second take? I mean, that's awesome, and the second thing, I actually just forgot what the second thing was.
I mean, because that guy's somebody's very thoughtful about what he does, but it doesn't sound like he's overthinking.
I remember the second thing now. Yeah, the second thing was I wanted to put some slide guitar on one of these things.
Yeah,
and it was an overdub, so it happened later on. It was on the song called "Fake Break," and I have a little lap steel here, and so I did lap steel slide parts. But I remember thinking like, man, I'm glad I'm doing this as an overdub because I don't want to be playing my like dumbass out-of-tune slide 20 take slide guitar parts with the guy who's played with George Harrison,
right? Like some of the masters of the instrument,
Blake Mills, and on and on and on. Like
no pressure.
That would have been the moment where I was like, oh man, I'm fraud.
Yeah, exactly. It's that would be a lot. So yeah, sometimes it's nice to be able to work independently that way and just have the output with it. So Mike, if you're into it, because I think the record's awesome. The new record,
Thank you very much.
Record, it's great. This is something I kind of started doing a ways back, where I kind of just go through song by song, and if you can tell me a little bit about each one, like how the song relates, how the song title relates to the song, composition, arrangement, recording, just any kind of anything that is associated with you and that you'd like to share with folks. Does that sound all right?
For sure.
Okay, cool. So first song is...
Also, I don't know, does everybody see the chat that you got going on over here, or is that just for like people?
Yeah. Well, that's for folks on YouTube. Folks on the podcast are not going to see the chat. So,
J-Bone gives a shout out
to Gainesville.
His birth town of Gainesville. So I want to give a shout out back to my man.
Yeah, they're like I at one point when I first started doing this, I would kind of throw the comments up. It's got distracting though, especially when it gets like really rowdy. I mean, it's great sometimes, but sometimes
you have a pretty respectable comment audience here, so it seems okay.
Exactly. Sometimes you get. I'm not going to say the type of artist, but sometimes you get rowdier crowds. Let's put it that way. We will leave it at that. So let's talk about the title track, "Everyone We Go." Not everywhere we go, as autocorrect. It's everywhere we go. The first song. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think the title, at least the concept of this word "everyone," I think that this word was introduced to me by Henry Kaiser, another amazing guitar player.
Oh, great guitar player. Yeah.
Friend of mine. Yeah. Really beautiful, generous, sweet, amazing guy. And obviously like groundbreaking musician. But I think he was explaining this idea of everyone, like, yeah, it's like everywhere, but with time, And I remember thinking, like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. If you have a word that refers to every place at once, which is already a totally bizarre thought, like,
yeah,
why
right.
can't you have a word, the same word that refers to every moment in time at once? So everyone, right? And it's just sort of like it's kind of an intoxicating idea, thinking about something that traverses all times at once, or something that could exist in all times. And I tend to think that the best music can sort of fit that description. And so I wanted to kind of think about this second chance with this group making this record as really being able to try to focus on this idea of making music that can exist in any place and in any time, but it would still have something to say in those areas, So that was kind of just the little title thought. A lot of times titles, I just sort of have like a notebook where I write down interesting words for titles. A lot of times I'll write the music, and then you need to call it something. So I go to my little list and I pick something.
New idea number 7 is not going to fly, right?
Yeah, although I have found now writing words for the MSSV stuff, that gives you the title, So and really I'm talking about instrumental music for that. But that song, that was one of the 3 pieces that I wrote specifically for this session that are actual compositions, like no free improv kind of pieces. But that one I came in with, I wrote it. It was one of these ones where the melody comes to me pretty quickly. And that doesn't happen all the time. That happened with Hospital Song, that song from the Wallflowers record.
Yeah.
It happened with this one. There's maybe been a couple of other songs in my life where it just comes and you're like, whoa, I need to get some paper and pencil going right now,
It just touches down in your brain somehow of like, this is it.
Yeah, I try not to ignore those things. I mean, I do hear a lot of music a lot of times, and I do try to sing it into the phone or the recorder or whatever, at least to just get to not forget it. And I have my voice memo thing on my phone. It's just this running log of like just little snippets of it. There's like hundreds of little ideas in there. And eventually I go back and I start piecing things together when I want to work on stuff. But this one just came, and I was at the guitar and I started writing it, and it was just a gift. It was cool. So it came out, and I knew it would sound great with those guys playing it.
Did you have the song title before you knew what the album was going to be called, or?
I think I had the song, and then I had this idea of everywhen, and I just kind of substituted the word for a little phrase where everywhere we go, everywhen we go. And then it just sort of made sense that should be the name of the record too.
Do you like time travel stories? Are you a fan of those?
Do I have any what?
Do you like time travel stories, like people that where that's the conceit of like a movie or a TV show or book or something along those lines?
I've never time traveled myself. Well, I don't have any time travel stories yet.
That's fine. I'm only bringing it up because I've had people on that just out of nowhere declared their absolute disdain for time travel storytelling, like having like any kind of like time shifting or like whatever. Like they just hate it, and I'm like, that seems like a weird thing, an arbitrary thing.
Yeah, okay. That is a little weird. Yeah, because tomorrow I'm gonna remember this.
Yeah, but because we're all time traveling every day of the week, every hour.
I'm not gonna hate it. It's just at that point, it's just the past, right? But so we've all already time traveled in that way. So maybe you should ask me this question tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. After we've time traveled, yeah. Second song. This is not a euphemism.
Yeah. Now this is one of. So we did another bunch of improv in this session. We'd improvised for maybe another 90 minutes on this day. And so this was one of the things that came out of that. And I think this piece was actually I think at the very end of the 90 minutes we did. This was sort of the last chunk of stuff that we were improvising, turned into this crazy groove between Jim and Watt. And, like when we made the first record, my basic thought was like, I can't believe no one's had Jim Keltner and Mike Watt play together before.
Right.
I guess we'll do it now. And then in my mind, like my involvement was pretty inconsequential at that point, because the main point was just like to have these two guys play.
Like completely like amazing.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to be a part of it, but
well, there's like this hero level rhythm section, but you're letting the rhythm section, letting them do their thing, and then you're adding stuff that's not like trying to compete for space.
Yeah, and so like that's what happened, and like when we're improvising, I remember this from the last time it happened too. There's a lot of points where like something great was going on, and the thought in my mind was like, don't play a bunch of stuff on top of this.
There's no need to overplay on this.
Don't fill it up, which is usually the running dialogue in my head anyways. Don't overplay, leave some room, let it breathe, But that idea of like just trusting that the music is going to come together because something great is already happening. You don't need to try at that point. You just need to get out of the way and let it happen. And that includes letting whatever you're going to do happen without forcing anything. And this was a really good example of, I think, when I was pretty successful at being able to not ruin something that was going along really good.
Well, it's very nicely in the 2 slot too. That's like that's a nice place. That's a nice place for that to be.
It's a good groove, and I did embellish it. I do a lot of live looping and live sampling with little guitar devices and stuff. And there is an overdub on this one that is sort of floating around the stereo field just to kind of add a little texture to it. And that's also informed by some of the guitar stuff and some of the bass stuff. So it was, again, kind of taking the free stuff, transcribing some parts of it just to see what was going on harmonically, what was going on rhythmically, and what could I add that would be cool. And then also kind of, I think, overdubbing some of the melodic parts as well on that song.
The next one is In the Center.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is interesting too. The first record, the Wildflowers record, the first one with Jim and Mike, I did a day at Big Ego before the recording day, the trio day, where I was just recording solo stuff, solo pieces. And so like the solo version of Blue Velvet on my friend's 1931 National guitar that's on Wall of Flowers, that was done that previous day. There were a couple of other things done that day, including In the Center. So this solo piece was done back in 2017, the day before the Wall of Flowers session. And I was initially going to include it on that secret third record, which may never come out, but the one that was the rest of the improv from the first session, right? I was going to put it on that. But I thought this was still a good piece, and I thought it was still a good way to kind of include some ambient kind of palette cleanser on this record. And I still like the song. So that's where that one is from. I think that's just a title I grabbed from somewhere. It sounded like something in the body or whatever. I don't know. It just seemed like it was kind of emanating from something.
Are you a note taker when it comes time to song title ideas? Would you like take notes of them?
Yeah. I've got a whole like book full of just interesting phrases,
Sound phrases. Magpie it up.
Yeah, or like if I'm reading and there's some interesting title. I think the Dirty Smell of Dying actually comes from a Don DeLillo book, or it might be a slight bastardization of one of his phrases from something. I forget what, but I believe I lifted it from
there. Malapropism is like one of the best ways to get awesome song titles too.
Okay, no,
which I can speak personally to that because my dad, who's lost a lot of hearing, but likes the rock and whatnot. He'll mishear things, but he will mishear things as much more like funny or clever than they are all the time, and it's just a constant source of amusement for me. And,
quick, write it down.
Yeah, it's like, oh my god, I gotta write that down immediately. That's amazing, but that is not what I said. But
I like that.
So that's In the Center. Yank It Out. That's a Watt.
It's a Watt tune. Yeah. You'd have to ask him about that one, which I'm sure you did.
I did. We talked a little bit about it, and it's that's it fits nicely in there. I was
so happy that he brought that to the session. I mean, I kind of asked him I didn't even ask him. I was like, if we do improv again, maybe if you want to have a couple little bass motifs or something, that would be cool to surprise us, And he and I got together before this session to do a couple of days of prac on like the songs that I brought.
Yeah.
And I rolled into his pad on the first day and he's like, all right, check out this tune I wrote. It's like this whole thing that he wrote. I was like, whoa, this is awesome. Yeah. I think he was even like, he was like, yeah, I don't know. Do you think we could do it? I was like, of course we're going to do it. What are you talking about? But he didn't have it was just the bass parts. And so he taught them to me, and I came up with the guitar parts that would fit with it. And then he had ideas for drum parts, but I don't think he told Jim that much. Jim just came up with, he found the right stuff to play. I mean, it was really great. And I think also I remember around this time, Watt was really listening a lot to that new live Coltrane Love Supreme live in Seattle.
Yeah. Good
stuff. So I think he was like way on that tip and thinking about the Coltrane Elvin thing when it came to the guitar solo with Keltner lighting it up too. I think that played a part of this somehow.
It's just nicely, like it sounds unique. It doesn't sound like it would be just on a Mike Watt record necessarily, but it sounds like
different band.
Yeah, it's a band. As it turns out, it's a band.
Well, it's like when you write something thinking about people, you know, like that was kind of, for me, that was always sort of like I first heard about like Duke Ellington. I think that was the way he would write. He said he didn't write for instruments. He wrote for the players.
Yeah.
He wrote for the way somebody plays this instrument. He didn't write for just alto sax 2 or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And that idea to me was always like a really beautiful idea, because I always thought one of the coolest things about music is the way people sound like individuals. So why not write for that? So that's something that I've always tried to carry through. And it's really cool when I see other people doing that too, like in this case.
You mentioned a little bit earlier, but Fake Break. What's next?
Yeah. Yeah, that song, it's actually, I don't think I've told this. I don't think anyone's ever asked about this song, but that song is, I really like this guy, Blake Mills, this guitarist, composer, improviser, producer, wonder person. He's got a really beautiful sound that's like really individual. The way he plays, he's got this very vocal quality to the way he plays, and I also love his voice and the songs he writes. But there was a song that came out kind of mid lockdown, and it came out on this new record. Actually, it's the bass player's song. Pino Palladino wrote all this music, and they recorded it. So I think everybody thought it was like a Blake Mills song at first, but it's actually a Pino Palladino song. The record is like Pino Palladino with Blake Mills. I forget how they did the billing, but it was another one. I related to it because I was like, oh, this is a little confusing for people. I can relate to that. You know?
Like, I want to do that. I want to confuse them.
I want to try to confuse the audience. Totally. Yeah.
Exactly. That's my main goal.
About whose project this is and what's the name of it is and how you spell it and what it stands for. But there was a song that came out. I think the song was called Just Wrong. Mm-hmm. And it had this really beautiful bass line that kind of like fit with the guitar chords in this really interesting way. And it was like kind of a sensation because I think, like, you know, when I would occasionally flip through like the Instagram videos, of course, they're like tailored to my deal. Right. So it's like all guitar nonsense. But it was just like one guitarist after another playing the intro to this song, like as a solo piece, you know, so you were just kind of hearing it everywhere. But it was also a really beautiful song. And I love the idea of there being this bass melody or a melody being played on the bass in a way that interconnected with sort of a rhythmic chordal thing on the guitar. And there was something about that was really, it just spoke to me in that moment. And a lot of times when I hear music like that, my first reaction is not, I have to learn that. That's actually the furthest thing from my mind. I don't want to learn it. But what I want to do, the reaction is kind of like, what would my song sound like with that idea? And so that's where this song comes from. It was a little experiment of hearing that song, that Pino Palladino song, Just Wrong, with Blake Mills. But in my thought of like, what would my song sound like that has the things that stick out to me most when I listen to it through my ear filter? What does that come out as? And that's kind of what this piece was. There's a few other elements and stuff in there, but that was sort of the impetus for it.
Nice.
Yeah, I called it Fake Blake, but that seemed like too obvious. So
so then it became Fake Break.
I just changed the word. Yeah.
Not enough of time.
That's the other solo piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was another one done at the 2017 session before Wall of Flowers. that I still felt was a good little ambient palette cleansing piece. So I kept that. Just again, phrase from the notebook for the title.
Did you have anything specifically you're trying to evoke or invoke? I don't know what the correct term is with that one. I guess evoke. Invoke would be if you were casting spells, I guess. So that's
I could be doing that a little bit, I guess.
I don't know what you're up to. Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there was this is the one that has this sort of textural loop thing, and it has a set of chords that are doubled on electric and 12-string electric, and then my friend's 1931 National Duolian that I get to borrow when I go out west. And actually, the chords on this piece, I think there's 5 chords. It's kind of coming back to me now. It's actually in that notebook back there somewhere. But there's 5 chords, and what was happening with that sort of second Baggatta Keltner Watt record that lives on my hard drive only, I had written this kind of compositional orchestrational thread throughout all the pieces that were based on this sort of 5-chord sort of shifting design. In this piece, Not Enough of Time was actually going to be the first piece on the record that sort of displays kind of just like a little raw version of what's about to come and weave its way through all these pieces.
Yeah. It's almost like a set piece that way or something.
Yeah, right. But since that no one will ever hear that record, I figured, well, I'll at least put it on here. Because I think it stands on its own, so it's okay, just by itself.
Why do you think no one's ever going to hear that one? Was that just...
Well,
you're in a different spot now, and you don't want to.
I don't know that. I guess I don't know. I guess I don't know. There's just like trust between the people you work with. I think Jim heard it and he said, "Sounds great, but why don't we do something new?"
Right.
And in my mind, that was his choice. So it'd be kind of like a weird thing.
Makes sense. I mean, there's nothing wrong with moving forward.
Yeah. Well, look, someday I'll die, and I won't. I won't have any say in what comes out and what doesn't. So
that's it. Good point. Good point. Fearmongers. That's what's up next.
Fearmongers was another one of the from our free improv session, and this might have been actually kind of the beginning of the free improv session. Now that I think about it, I don't really remember, but. Yeah, I think this was just, again, something got set up and we got into some groove. This is a really weird groove. This is like, not weird, but just like, it's kind of time with no time, which is not really different too. I mean, that's like, to my ears, that's always been kind of a Paul Motion thing or a Rashid Ali thing. But the idea of like displaying momentum and time without steady time, right? Although there is kind of steady time, but there's such a big give and take, such an organic feel to the way Jim and Mike play together, that they got into this really heavy, deep, dirty groove. And I was trying to play stuff on top that had nothing to do with it, but still kind of fit in some sort of like dramatic way.
Yeah, it kind of weaves in a little bit.
It kind of weaves in, yeah, but it's real weedy too. It's real like kind of swampy almost, in like a atonal 12-tone avant swamp improv thing.
Avant swamp is pretty great, man.
Avant swamp prov for my Gainesville people.
There you go. Yeah, exactly, for all the Gainesville folks. Nice. And so then we have Measure of a Life with the intro as like a separate kind of thing as well. But yeah, Measure of a Life.
Yeah. And so this is the solo intro, Measure of a Life, again, on my friend's 1931 National Duolian resonator guitar that I think about and wish was mine. That was another solo piece. That song, that melody, that intro track, that was just improvised back on that original solo session before Wall of Flowers. That was just, I had this guitar and I just played this little folk sounding kind of melody. And that recording of the intro, that was the very first and only time I played it. And that was it. And coming back to knowing I was going to do this session, I always kind of thought about that song. Never checked it out, never worked on it, but I knew it was in there. It was actually in the recording, and in my mind, I knew I would sit down and I would kind of flesh it out one of these days. So it gave me a reason to do that, because I thought it would be really cool to play it with these guys, because it kind of tied into that first session, and it never was going to be used or whatever, but it was just this really beautiful thing that just kind of unspooled while I was playing this guitar. And so I just transcribed it, and I was going to start changing stuff, and because there's like a funny number of bars. I think there's like a 9-bar section and a 7.
Yeah, I wasn't sitting there counting it, but I did notice that it was like,
yeah. And so I was going to change it, but then I was like, man, I shouldn't change it because it's all this built-in breath. And I think I should just keep it pretty honest to what it was. So I just lifted it from that solo recording and just kind of wrote it out as a chart, and then we played it. I think I added like a little middle section that I doubled on acoustic, but yeah, that was just that. That was like another great moment of a song that kind of presented itself. I didn't know anything would ever happen with that song, but it turned out really good. I wrote a real simple bass line, and I remember Watt came up with a much better one at one of our practices.
Right.
That little like half step. I just sort of had the note. I just had boom, 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 boom. But he's
classic Watt style.
He's got such a thing, yeah.
Yeah, it's a classic Watt style bass line too, which is so
it's gorgeous,
perfect. It's like, oh yeah, I know who's playing that. It's like like I think when I had Stephen Edgerton on from Descendants and all, and Flag and what it's like, that's a dude that once he starts, I know who that is. I know who's playing guitar there.
I know. I really aspire to that idea that you can hear like one note and you say, "Oh, I know who that is."
Yeah, that's
I love it. That's one of the most beautiful things about music. It's like you just have another voice, another way of expressing yourself in a different medium where you can do stuff you can't do every day.
Yep, transcend a little bit, and then record. Everywhere we go, slight return. Which of course that's a Hendrix reference, of course.
It is. You got me. Yeah.
Like newsflash, everybody. Yeah.
Wait, who?
I don't know who that is. Jimmy what? Henderson?
No, it is, and that actually it's not on the vinyl, but it is on because we just ran out of time on the vinyl.
Yeah, it's not a.
It is on the digital.
Yeah.
That is actually the first thing that we played that day. It was Everywhere We Go is the first tune that we did. I think the actual song on the record, I think that might be the first take. I don't know if we did a second take, but just kind of warming up, getting sounds. That was what was Slight Return. And actually there's if you listen really carefully, you can hear a couple of mics kind of being added halfway through because they weren't all set up. We were just playing just to kind of get sounds and stuff. But later we listened back and we were like, oh man, this sounds really good. We should do something with this. So that's what that is.
Yeah, and it's a way to bookend it too, right? Like, so it starts off with the thing, and then it kind of ends with a more different version of the thing. And
you could end it with Measure of a Life, and that's a great ending. That's what the vinyl is. Yeah. And if you're listening all the way through to the digital and you get there, you might think that's a great ending, and then you hear the other ending, which is a different version of the first song, but which is actually the first thing we ever played on the end.
Is the very end. Yeah, exactly.
It's also another cool way to end it, I like that idea where you can listen to the form in different ways and get different things. Kendrick Lamar?
Yes.
He put a record out a couple years ago called Damn. And there's like a thing online, where people are talking like, oh, it works forwards and it works backwards. It tells the story forwards, but it tells a different version of the same story backwards.
Wow, that's interesting.
And it actually works beautifully. I mean, definitely like they planned it that way because it's really slick. But I always like that idea where you can sort of shift the order and get a little different version of the story as you listen through.
It's Ouroboros, some might say.
Kind of is Ouroboros, yeah.
Cool. So that's the record. That's and of course they can get Everywhere We Go. You can get it. Well, you got it at your Bandcamp. The Mike Beggatta.
Yeah, if you go to mikebeggatta.bandcamp.com, you can find it. You can find the vinyl, you can find the digital. If you want to go to the BigEgoRecords.com website, you can buy from them. If you want to support your tech overlords, you can just go to Spotify or whatever.
Yeah. I like to make sure that the artists and musicians get as little money as possible. So it's easy for me.
Hey man, convenience,
Convenience, give me convenience or give me death, right? Awesome. So it's an awesome record. I highly recommend it. It's interesting.
Thanks,
we'll mention again before we close that. I want to talk to you about what do you feel like the place of effects, digital effects, analog effects, effects pedals in your guitar playing, in composition. I think that's when nerds talk about such things, there's hotly contested debates on both sides of it. But I feel like you, like Nels Klein, there's a number of players I can think of that like use it very like as almost a compositional tool and a way to kind of make things like different sounding or cool sounding, but aren't like a crutch necessarily, where that's like the whole thing.
Well, yeah, I tend to. It's funny as a guitar player. There's such a whole like subset of society that is also guitar players, and it seems to be like people think that this is some kind of like particular like special in like little wink nudge, like, oh, I see you got the so and so pedal with the like that is that's like
Onculator 5000. Huh?
It's such an immediate turnoff for me. I'm just like, man, I have no interest in talking about this stuff at all,
Yeah, I'm with you.
I mean, I do enjoy like talking about it when it's something I want to talk about, but just to kind of talk about it seems sort of like the epitome of like mindlessness to me. That said, I know that it is a thing and it's totally fine, but
people get really into it, man. Like, and this is not a gear channel, but people get really into it.
Yeah. I mean, it's totally cool. Any way that people need to do something to make the music they want to make is great.
Yeah.
And so I don't really have anything to say on it one way or another, what people do. But for me, I tend to think about that stuff as extensions of the instrument or as other instruments that inform what I'm going to play.
Right.
So I think at its worst, an effects unit is something like you play your instrument, you turn the thing on, and then you keep playing the same way, only now it sounds a little different. To me, that's sort of like kind of a mindless use of it, which is not to say that it can't be awesome and exactly what the song needs, but I think for me, I tend to approach it as a way of like, if I put something on top of the instrument or in tandem with the instrument, I know that for the way that I hear stuff and the way that I react to stuff, it's going to make me do something differently.
Right.
And for me, that, I guess you have to say that for everything. For me, that's like the way that I think it works best for what I'm trying to do with it, So in my case, it turned, like I think people have an idea of what's going on, but like if you actually see live, like I don't really have that much stuff. I don't have like a bunch of pedals and all kinds of things.
You don't have like the coffin.
No, yeah, because that's just
you're like, oh my God, how many things do you have in there?
I've found ways to do a lot of stuff just on the instrument or with my fingers or with little things that I can touch. I really like touching the guitar. I really like feeling the strings. I really like putting my fingers on the strings. I like manipulating the strings with the pick and the whammy bar and playing different parts of the guitar that aren't normally played, and using the volume and tone knobs on the guitar. Like, man, that's most of what I do is that it's turned out. It wasn't always that way, but that's kind of where I'm at. And I just have a few things that I need for different amounts of sounds, I guess. So like really it's the guitar, the whammy bar on the guitar, the different parts of the guitar, the volume knob, the pick versus the fingers. That's most of it. And then usually I have like a fuzz pedal just to kind of have a bunch of different sort of gnarled up textures that you can manipulate again with the volume knob on the guitar and get different sort of shades of that. And then I go into kind of like this little weirdo phaser vibrato. It looks like a wah pedal, but it's orange.
Yeah.
They didn't make them for a while, and everybody hated them when they came out. But they're cool. It's not really quite like a phase shifter, and I like to kind of change the speed as I play it. And then from that, I go into a Moog, the big ring modulator with the wood, because it's a really cool tremolo thing, and it's really cool sort of like ring modulation. I kind of think about it as like a fuzz pedal for like clean tone.
Yeah.
But what I like about that thing is that it kind of can self-manipulate the speed fluctuation. So instead of like turning a tremolo on a guitar amp where you get the whoa, 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 this one will kind of go whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah, it kind of changes it up as it.
It's super like bizarre for your listeners to hear, but it sort of fluctuates the speed. I don't know how else to tell you without doing the sound.
Without doing the sound, there's no other way.
You ever listen to that show Car Talk? Remember people call it the car show? They'd say, "Okay, what's the
people would describe the sound from the car they're making?" Right. Yeah, amazing. I just shoot it into my face.
Guitar Talk. It's the same kind of vibe.
It's the same stuff. Yeah, the pedal kind of sounds like. Oh, great. Okay, that's.
And then from that, sometimes I use a whammy pedal, but I've kind of gotten out of that a little bit because it's just sort of one extra thing to bring. Some of it too is just traveling. Like, I don't use a pedal board because it's just too much of a kludge for me. I'm always tripping over it. The wires are coming out. It's just like, I just can't get it together on that level. So I need like big things on the ground that I'm not going to trip over, that I can set up and tear down pretty quick. So I don't want to have a lot of stuff, and I don't have a lot of little things. Everything I have is sort of a big footprint for that reason. But from there, I'd go into an amp, which I use a Benson amps, this amp they make called the Vincent. And then from there, I come out of the loop of the amp. I'm giving you the whole tour into a looper.
Rundown suddenly, but I'm here for it.
into like a looping device, which lately is by this company Red Panda called the Tensor.
Oh, okay, yeah. I haven't tried one of those, but I'm familiar.
It's sort of like a tape machine that kind of
like
does randomness, which is really attractive to me. And then from that, I go into a delay, which if I'm traveling, it's one of those old deluxe Memory Men electro-harmonics things. But if I'm driving, or if I can find one, I use one of the old Roland Space Echoes, the tape delay.
Oh man, yeah, those are great, but boy, like you look at them funny, they break down. I feel like half the time.
Well, I don't think that so much. I think that's a little bit of a myth, but I think
everyone I've had has been like that. But that's
okay. Well, then I've had good luck. But
maybe I got a bum badge.
It is just like a bigger thing to carry, which is it's
awkward. Like you're not going to take it on a plane,
But that's it. I mean, it's really like if you rewind, it's just 5 things in an amp and a guitar, and that's plenty. That's plenty for me.
Well, because there's plenty you can do without the effects as well. I mean, I think back to like Fred Frith doing all the prepared guitar stuff, right? I mean, that's a perfect example.
The first record I made, my first record is called Canto, and that's all prepared guitar etudes. I think I recorded in like 2001.
Yeah.
And I was listening to a lot of Frith, a lot of Derek Bailey, a lot of Henry Kaiser. It was just sort of like, I've always been into like, how else can you play the guitar?
Yeah, exactly. And, obviously Sonic Youth did their own iteration of that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Thurston and Lee. Yeah. Big time into Sonic Youth, of course.
Little more hilariously vulgar, but as I was saying I've said it before, I'll say it again. Like I feel like those two guys together is like one of my favorite guitar players. Like Lee and Thurston.
Or one of your favorites.
Is like I love they're both great, but together it's like that.
Well, they're very complementary to each other for sure, because I think there's a lot that each of the other one can't do. So I think you make a good point. They're like sort of the Voltron of extended technique guitarists.
Exactly. Hey, Mike, this has been great, man. Thanks so much for spending so much time with me. So there's, of course, I'll put in the show notes the new record, Everywhere We Go. there is an MSSV record coming out. Are there any tour plans or anything along those lines that you can talk about right now for 2020?
I'm actually starting it right now, planning it. not starting the tour, but it's going to probably be.
I was going to say that's ambitious.
Yeah, it's probably going to be most of September and October of next year. All
fantastic.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll be sure to check it out. And I urge
you. Milwaukee.
I live in Milwaukee. Yeah, did you play Milwaukee last time? I think you played Chicago. You did play. I want to say my band was playing the same night you were playing at a totally different city, and I was bummed that it was like literally at exactly the same time. So I was like, oh, I would totally love to go to that, but I don't remember what.
We'll try and get up there this time for you.
Yeah. I like the record. I'll see it eventually. That's the thing. So Mike, this is the only can question that I ever ask. It's you can choose to interpret it however you like. Why do you do what you do?
I don't know how to do anything else.
Fair enough.
It's all I've ever wanted to do was just do music, Ever since I saw my dad playing guitar and he would play it for me, I was like hooked.
Mike Beggatta, it's been so great having you, man. Thanks so much for coming on, brother.
Thanks, Conan. It's a treat.
Take care and check you later.
Thank you.
All right. There he goes, Mike Beggatta. Why don't we hear one of the songs off of this fantastic record that they did? This is going to be, you know what? Let's just go. I think what did I play in that one episode? Let's go with the title track. That's a good one. Everywhere we go. Baggatta, Keltner, Watt. That's the title track. It's a great little record. Go ahead and check that out. We'll put that in the show notes. Let's hear some main steam stop valve MSSV. This is the Eureka moment.
Oh, yeah. Certain no. Well, thanks, home man. Fuck just show. Act monkey, see monkey, do shit, sky go. Oh, man. Watch Conan, no. But words get useless, so Homan had to act. Use the face and hands, then sound. He sizzled. Conan realized steam's dead this side, other side, steam live. Steam live! Eureka! Bang, steam, stop now! Eureka! Bang, steam, stop now!
The Eureka moment. Main steam stop valve. MSSV. Here's Blue Velvet. Blue Velvet. That is Baggatta, Keltner, Watt. One more is Fearmongers. All right. So there you go. That was Fearmongers. So you can get that as well as... Oh, yeah, what I played before. Yeah, it was a little Blue Velvet for you. That was on the Live Flowers. Actually, that is on the... Not the Live Flowers version. That is the Wall of Flowers version of that. I'm all over the place here. Anyway, so Mainstream Stop Valve, MSSV, and bookended by some Baggatta, Keltner, Watt, including 2 from Everywhere We Go. Good record, guys. Check it out. Hey, I'd like to thank Mike Beggatta for being on the show. If I get Keltner on, I'd have the triumvirate, right? The name of the show is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. Thank you so very much for listening to it. This show airs Thursdays, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific, YouTube, Twitch, and good old RadioNope.com. Archives of the shows are always available for free. For free, people. ProtonicReversal.com. No ads, no sponsors. No kidding. If you like the show, though, and you want to get episodes sooner and or support the show, you can do that. Yes, you can. You can do that. Patreon.com/ProtonicReversal. $1 a month will achieve that goal gladly. Right now, if you want to hear the Mike Watt episode, you're going to have to pony up a buck. But it's good. It's like the other side of this, right?
50,000 watts of power.
I always appreciate people sharing the episodes around that they like, letting people know about it. Writing reviews is goofy, but it helps with the all-powerful and all-encompassing algorithm. But yeah, most of all, thanks for listening. I appreciate it.
This microphone turns sound into electricity.
Lots of great stuff coming up. Alec Mackay, Hammered Holes next week.
Can you hear me now?
Stay safe out there.
Out on Route 128, in the dark and lonely.
I'll check you later.
I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the a transmitter. It circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? This is a test! If this had been a real emergency, hey, hey!